Hello, and welcome to the Exponential Growth Podcast, powered by Analyst Investors. I'm your host, David Olivencia, co-founder of Analyst Investors, and a passionate advocate for leveraging innovation and technology to drive success. Let's get started. This is Exponential Growth. I also want to give gratitude to Salvi Media. They're the founding sponsor of the podcast. They're a premier executive content agency dedicated to crafting exceptional content and strategies that elevate companies' brands and their executives. They're creators of the Emmy Award-winning CEO series. I think many of you have seen that. We've also featured one of my portfolio companies, Analyst Investors and Hallow, on their CEO series. And they've had in-depth interviews with CEOs talking about their personal journeys and business experience. The CEO series can be found on Cheddar, Entrepreneur Magazine, Reach TV, and really want to thank Salvi Media for their support of the podcast. You can also follow them on social media, as well as they have a podcast studio in Chicago. Join them as well. So again, thank you, Salvi Media, for making this podcast possible. We have a very special guest today, somebody I've known about 20 years, 2 decades or so, when he was working with the Mickey Mouse, leading IT technology transformation at Disney, and then have partnered with him in a lot of different initiatives over the year. He's had an amazing career in technology, some of the top firms, top education firms, I believe New York, and we'll talk more about that with the public schools of New York, all of their technology, and is doing a lot of things now from a leadership perspective, CXO perspective. When you look at technology, you look at the senior executives and what's going on there across multiple industries, has a great perspective, an investor across a lot of different areas, and somebody I admire. When I think about technology, I think about investing. This is one of the leaders that I go to. So welcome to the podcast, Alejandro Mainetto. Alex, welcome.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. Finally, we get to reconnect after a little while, and I'm really pleased to be here. So thank you for hosting me.
All right, great. Well, we'll jump into, I give a little context, but we'll jump into some of the details, and we'll start out right away. I like to let everyone know, tell me about you, and maybe a little about Alex. I touch on a little bit on your career, but tell me about your career, and yeah, just tell us about you, Alex.
Sure. So originally from Peru, grew up in New York, so I can talk really fast. And now I've been here in Florida for about 15 years, so I'm in the South Florida area. From a career perspective, I've probably told you this 20 times, but my career essentially encompasses kind of three big areas or 3 phases, right? So the first one, as a corporate technology executive, so work for companies like the Walt Disney Company, like you mentioned, and no, I wasn't Mickey, but I can tell you plenty of stories about stuff that happens behind the scenes, but then I killed the magic, right? So I don't want to do that. Then work for companies like Kaplan and the Department of Education in New York City. So that was kind of the first area of my career. The second area of my career, many years in consulting. So had the fortune to be associated with many great firms in that consulting area, IBM, Ernst & Young, and not too long ago, I was with the Microsoft Consulting Organization as well. So lots of global roles, trying to oversee multiple engineering and delivery capabilities, as well as the fact that many of those things included very large distributed teams around the world. And then the last tranche, I have to say, is probably one of the most fun parts of my life has been as an entrepreneur. So, I've done that twice, and that's why I have no hair left, as many of you know. Many of you met me when I had lots of full hair. I joke around that David and I go to the same barber, but that's not true. This is what happens when you invest.
Hey, I was saying this is the ESG. We're saving the world one blow dryer at a time.
Right, my friend. That's right. So the first time I had an opportunity to focus on digital strategy many moons ago when people were still trying to figure out what digital strategy meant, and had a good run there. And then 5 years ago, I decided to start my second startup, and this one is called Cyan One. And then right after leaving Microsoft, I decided that one of the things that we wanted to do was focus on AI. So about 3 years ago or so, we pivoted and started focusing on providing services and building products on the AI side of the house. So from a services perspective, we serve primarily three verticals, which is the education, hospitality, and travel, and then also media and entertainment verticals. And then from a product perspective, we've now built two products. One is an AI virtual assistant, and then the second one is a post-call analysis AI product. So it analyzes calls that come out of the call, that come out of any call center, basically. I don't know if you remember In Living Colors, but there was a
Oh yeah,
great skit. For those of you, I'm dating myself.
a lot of
Uh,
great skits, man. A lot of great skits, by the way. And if you haven't seen In Living Color, oh, you got to watch. That got me through college. And look, if you think about Sundays, there was In Living Color. I think there was one before that too, or after that. But that they got me through college. Oh, there's some great ones there.
yeah, it launched so many great great
It did.
stars.
It did.
Uh,
By the way,
so
no, somebody was telling me, just a side note. I think the movie White Chicks. I think they're going to do White Chicks too. By the way, I saw that one was coming out. My kids love that one. Go ahead.
So there was a particular skit where I joke around about this a lot because there was one skit that was called Hey Mon, right? And then every guy competed for how many jobs they had, right? So it's like I have 50 jobs, and the other guy would come and said, no, I have 100 jobs, and then the next guy is like, I gotta go to my 200 job. And so and so I feel like that today at times, because then most recently, I've joined a really great organization called CXO Partners. And CXO Partners provides, technology transformation strategy, but also at the core, it provides leadership services from an interim and fractional point of view. And we work with middle market companies or PE-backed companies, and we provide that interim leadership that they may need when they really need the help and the assistance, and then also assistance from a technology strategy and transformation and modernization point of view for those companies. So been learning quite a lot about the private equity industry over this last few months, as you know, very familiar with the VC industry for many years. But I've been learning quite a lot about PE most recently, and so that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, no, the other Living Color one was Homie, don't play that. Right? Wait, Homie the Clown. No, if you're listening to this podcast, you haven't seen In Living Color, you have definitely have to watch it. Alex, you rekindled an old memory that now maybe this weekend I'm gonna binge on a couple of those.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
no, that's good. And I think this model, like what you call it, fractional or services in this, CTO, CIO, just executive suite, right? But I think primarily this in the technology area, because things are changing so fast. Even if you have a CIO in your company, you're just mainly just trying to survive and keep the lights on and battle all the just ongoing operational things, let alone to stop and think ahead and be strategic about all the ways you're going to need to transform. And to me, it's a great model. And I think you're in a great space to do it. In private equity, there's all there's the big consulting companies for like the Fortune 1,000 or whatever like that. But there's this whole ocean of like these middle market companies, right? That just need these type of services in an environment that's changing and all that kind of stuff. So you're in a great space, and you guys are going to do very, 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 very well. So thank you for sharing the background on you there. And then if we think about call it trends, right? So this podcast is about just key trends that you see. It's, trends, investments, and leadership. On the trend side, everybody talks about AI. Feel free to talk about AI, but what do you see are like, just to the listeners out there, right? And sometimes like share, like talking to my grandma, my abuelita, just say, hey, this is why you should, like, what would you tell everybody out there, just what are the trends that they should be thinking about, that they should have on their mind, that they should be preparing for, are the big ones that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, if I was talking to my abuelita, perhaps it's a different set of trends I would talk to her about. I would definitely tell her to learn how to use ChatGPT. But no, all serious aside, I think that if you were to ask me what are the three things that I care about that personally affect how I invest and the things that I pay attention to, I think it's three things, and
Yeah.
it all has to do with augmentation. And let me take you through that in a second. So for me, augmentation has kind of three big pillars. One is life augmentation. Uh, the second thing is human augmentation, and then the third one is physical augmentation. And when I talk about life augmentation, I'm talking about the future of what we have right now, which is truly autonomous agentic AI. Right now, tons of hype, not a lot of meat, not a lot of things. The vendors are racing through they're going as fast as they can to try to get something out there that is truly autonomous, that can reason on its own. Right now, we just don't have that yet necessarily. And so like I said, lots of hype, and we got to be able to see through that and work through that. So that's life augmentation. The second thing is human
No, so just
augmentation.
so I got that right, life, like Life.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
The reason why I say that it's about life augmentation, because this is what's going to be able to power you and augment you in your job, in your
Yeah.
life, and in everything that you basically do, kind of in your day-to-day, in your day-to-day things.
Yep.
The second thing then, it's about human augmentation. And right now, we're not really talking about it too much, but it's brain-computer interfaces. And I know that we've invested also in some of those areas as well. Companies like Neurable, perhaps, and others, but lots of opportunity there. I think that there is so much that is coming at such a rapid pace that the only way that we're going to be able to eventually keep up is to augment ourselves as,
Yeah.
as now. And it may not look like that Neuralink, device that is available today. It eventually, hopefully, gets better, and the procedures get less invasive, and all of
Invasive. You're hanging around with a big little knot in your head. Yeah, no, I get it.
and it looks funny and it feels funny today, right? But 10 years from now is going to be like probably a lot more common, and then 20 years from now it may be normal, right? And so what I'm saying is that 10 years from now you're going to see a ton of more human beings being augmented, and BCIs and brain computer interfaces. It's just at the such an early beginning of that. And then the last part that I think is about physical augmentation is about robotics, right? And and I'm not talking about the traditional stuff that you find in the factories and the robotic arms. I'm talking about full humanoids and androids that are in your house. My father lives with me and he's elderly. And I I could just imagine the day that I'm able to be able to bring him some help to essentially help him in everything that he needs to do. And that's going to be one of the first areas that actually, that when these things hit home, that's probably the first area that is going to touch, is going to be, support for the elderly, help around the house. And you remember not too long ago that this is the stuff that you could only watch in movies and that you could only sort of dream about. But in Japan, there's already doing things, and in many other countries, they're already starting to pilot some of these things in a limited basis. And there's a ton of stuff that, for example, NVIDIA is doing to train and to better train this thing. So when they get to your house, it's actually not some surprise, and it's not going to turn to be like the Terminator movie. So
Yeah.
So those are probably the three things that are definitely have me excited and thinking
Well,
about.
I love the way you frame that up. I think on this, and it's happening so fast, right? If you look at humanoid robots 2 years ago, 5 years ago, pretty much minimal to zero, maybe, and even you saw different type, of robotic type things. And I always say that whatever you've seen, it's only going to get better, cheaper, faster with more capabilities, right? They're running faster than humans, they're jumping faster than humans, and now, I mean, I think they're able to dance now and do different things, but it would only get better, cheaper, faster than what it is right now, and even more human like. I mean, you've even seen some of the way they're shaping some of the faces and stuff like that. I mean, and it's happening. Like, well, this is the thing between linear and exponential. It's been happening. It's been kind of, but it's starting to like really, and so the amount of change is going to be fast. So I totally agree with you there. On the second one, I agree with you, and I think the one thing that it was a little bit of an aha moment. I'd say maybe 2, 3 weeks ago for me was that I looked at what Elon Musk is doing. Right, he's got he's got the Neuralink, but he's got X and he's got AI, and you can see a convergence of all of that. Because think about it, you've got that, and then you've got all the world's knowledge, or at least one bucket of the world, and they're going to be competing AIs and all that kind of stuff that you're going to want to partner with. If you go, you're going to want to partner with, well, who's got the most intelligent, truth seeking, or whatever, right? And it hit me that, wow, I don't think people might be looking at these things like, well, if those things converge, man, it's what the potential is in the future to have that with you all the time. That's gonna be that's gonna be amazing.
Oh yeah, certainly is, and I would say that for me, the umbrella technology for all of this is, and 10 years from now, it seems like a long time away, but you know what? It's around the corner, frankly, from a technology standpoint. It's reaching at least some initial level of AGI, right? And when we talk about that human augmentation, which I think is necessary at
And what
some
is
point,
it, just for everybody, what is AGI? What does that mean, Alex?
it's general artificial intelligence. And so, many people sort of say, well, that's probably not going to happen for another 20 years. Or, I tend to be on the optimistic side in probably everything that we do, even, so if I was to be a futurist, that's what I would tell you is that this thing is moving at such a rapid pace that in 10 years, which is a lifetime in technology, right? But it's gonna be here sooner than we know it. And so at that point, um then the worry that everybody has is that this thing is gonna be moving so fast. At that point, these things are augmenting themselves, right? So now they no longer need a human to be able to do something to them, because this humanoid robots, whatever machine, whatever AI is now in control of them sort of augmenting themselves. And at that point, if that human, you and I, that if a human being doesn't keep up with that in some way, like what you were describing, then we're going to be left behind in a significant way. And I know, I believe me, I have this conversation with many people, and they look at me like I'm reading a script from a Hollywood movie, and it's not. It feels like that now, but 10 years from now, it won't.
No, I say that sometimes people look at me like I have three eyes and two bald heads. It's like, no, no, no. This stuff is coming. It's like, you see, I always tell people I've been pretty good at connecting the dots and seeing things. And I'm telling you, this thing is coming. And I don't know if people, well, this is why I'm doing the podcast, right? I mean, I'm just saying, hey, you can hear me, you can hear other people talk about it, right? And then get ready, because that's the other thing. Okay. And this is what I hope the listeners do is like, okay, well, you can get data, but you can hear this amazing perspective, the way you're laying it out. But then the key is, well, then what do you do? Like, how do you best prepare for this? this is the world that's coming. Well, how do you best prepare yourself, right? Which kind of gets into this next part then around investing, right? So, which is one area of how you can prepare. There's a lot of areas, but maybe along in that area, Alex, how do you best prepare? What should you do to prepare? And then how do you think about investing in this environment and just in general, your kind of investing philosophy, what you've learned over the years in investing? Share your perspectives there.
Yeah, so one of the first areas that I worry about when I invest is about, can the company that I'm investing in, can they scale, right? And that's a everyday topic that we discuss, even with these middle market companies that we advise on an everyday basis, is can you really scale? And so two things that I've learned, for me, lessons learned on how to spot some of these things. So one is culture and people. Um, I've seen companies with fantastic products, but with not so great people at the helm, and sort of probably weaker cultures than they should have instilled in the company, right? And cultures, I mean it in the broader sense of the word, where there's, values, processes, everything put together, a common vision, right? And so for me, that's kind of the first thing, is you got to have that. And if you don't know how to do it, there's help. You can go get help and how to get that done. But that's kind of the first thing. The second thing then is what I call customer obsession, right? And um, and there's a lot of people that talk about customer service, but for me, this is a non-negotiable, right? So many funders get caught up in building features and talk about, features, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But do you really understand what your customer needs? And can you really stay not only in par with them, but ahead of the curve, in terms of what they're going to need, and either create a demand or open up a new market that nobody told you that they needed, right? You remember the famous saying, if they would have asked, uh,
Henry Ford.
yeah, exactly. Right. You just said a faster horse, right?
Yeah,
And so that's
faster
sometimes,
carriaging.
yeah, and that's sometimes the problem of trying to depend too much on just looking at customer validation. Customers expect the company to take them somewhere else, right? Now, do you remember when Alexa was first introduced? I mean, 12 years ago, everybody would laugh at those commercials when they said, who the heck is going to talk to a device in my living room? It's like, well, they created a demand where nobody knew that they really needed this thing, right? And so that's what I'm talking about, right? So are the things that we're investing on, are they, do they really understand that customer? Can they create a demand where, that demand doesn't exist today? Um, Now, so that's kind of one angle. The other angle is about sort of exponential growth, which is kind of what your topic is about. One
Yeah.
of two of my favorite people that I've read a lot about is Ray Kurzweil, which is a great
Yeah.
vision pictures,
Yep.
and the other one is Peter Diamandis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Both of them.
when you talk about Singularity University and a lot of the stuff, they worked for a ton of years around exponential growth. Um, and so for me, it's about, then when I think about exponential growth and how do we reach that, then I'm thinking about that. The first thing is, uh, do you really have a moat? Or Warren Buffett had, probably coined that phrase for all, coined that phrase for all that I know. But it's really a differentiator in terms of what you have. And is there something like the network effect? So, Uber probably became the most popular, even became a verb, if you remember, right? When you talk about, I'm gonna Uber there, right? It's become a verb. But they were the ones that really popularized for the masses the concept of, the more people that we put on this, so therefore the network effect,
Yeah.
the more valuable that my product becomes. And so from an exponential growth standpoint, those are a couple of things that I look at. The other thing is product market fit. But product market fit for an untapped market, really, right? Because there's a lot of discussion about product market fit, But then the question is the TAM really there or not? And that's one of the harder parts to try to prove and try to figure out, how do I reach that TAM? How do I reach that market? But that's part of the due diligence that you need to do, and that, and that's why sometimes these investments, when you try to do them in a rush fashion, it's like gambling, right? And so you need to be careful around how much time do you spend on that due diligence, because you really need to figure out what are the things that is this person telling me, is it accurate or not, right? So those are a couple of things. The last one I would say is that, and this is funny because it's happened to me not too long ago. It's actually timing.
Yeah.
So is the market already moving in that direction? Or am I needing to educate the people first while that market happens? And I know that, for example, let's use Uber again for an example, right? They needed to re-educate how you needed to grab a cab, right? So it was different. It was a sort of a learning process because the market wasn't there. So sometimes you need to do that. But when you really need to educate, and that process is going to take too long, then the timing may not be there. There is such a thing as being too early for your time.
Yeah.
The reason why I say it happened to me most recently is because when we tried to introduce our virtual AI assistant in Latin America, we were
Yeah.
too early for its time. And because essentially what we ended up doing for many, many months was just educating. And so, as I look back in terms of, if I was giving advice to a founder, would be pay attention to that, because sometimes what you got to do is you got to pivot and say, you know what, in this particular market, I'm educating for too long. I need to move to another market where the market is already moving instead of sort of being here. So some
Yeah.
lessons learned from the trenches.
Yeah, so there's a couple points I just wanted to, I think, culture, you think about these, some of the biggest companies in the world that are, just continue to grow at massive scale. It's like, yeah, like Amazon, it's multi-billion dollar, and then just they're growing 20-30% every year and they're in the, billions, trillion dollars in valuation. But one of the key, it's their culture. It's like it's their culture and how they infuse that culture. I think Amazon's got like almost 1 million employees or something like that. I mean, it's huge, but it's not only them. It's, look at NVIDIA, right? They're continue, their culture and the way they've done it. Apple, you can go on to others as well. So I think culture, and it's like, and the key ingredients are the things you talked about, just like vision, values, customer obsession. You mentioned the vision and other things, right? The the interesting thing about, you talk about Uber and timing. The one thing that I was thinking about when you mentioned that was, you think about, like, there was also, like, at least for Uber, and it happens for other people, but you think about, like, kind of what had to come together, right? You had to have, you had to have the smartphones, right? And they had to have the GPS kind of in there. You had to have the payment infrastructure, and kind of think about the timing. All that stuff came together roughly, and they were a little bit ahead, because I think they were just like reserving for like limo rides or something like that, right?
Right.
And then they were able to kind of ride it at the right time, and then even go globally, right? Because, I think it was on I was like, the way they scaled, and then, I go to Colombia, and then boom, I'm able to use an Uber back. It was maybe, I don't know, 5 years after they hit most of the major cities in the US. And it's like just the way they grow and scale. So timing is it's vital. And with all this, so you think about now all these different advances that are coming together, and then, where that timing is and how you jump in, right? um what about leadership? So this is the last part, right? So now you're in a, you framed up the augmentation areas. How should people be, and you're working with leaders amazing companies. How do people best lead in this environment? Or do they do anything? Is anything different? Maybe your perspective. How do people best lead in this environment of exponential growth from your experience?
Yeah, this is such an interesting time. It's there's probably more turnover on at least a couple of C-level roles than there's ever been. Um, and and it's interesting to watch, but sometimes it's not as interesting is to sort of be there in the middle of it. So it could be interesting depending on how you look at it. The bottom line is that if you remember digital transformation, right, for the last probably 15 years or so, there's the sort of the term has been around, or that we've been going through some of this stuff. Um, was a certainly a inflection point from a technology perspective, but also from a business perspective, because everybody was like, I need to make my business a digital business, right? It's okay, I grow flowers, but I need to make it a digital business. I'm a bookstore, but I need to make it a, right? Or if not, I'm going to be out of business, right? Amazon already put me out of business, but now I need to go do something. So, there's been this conversation for many years about that. The
Yeah.
difference is that now digital transformation was a time where, you know, you could afford to fall back and you had sort of still time to catch up. In this AI transformation era, you don't have time to do that.
I
And so
totally agree.
so either you get your stuff together, or you're gonna be left behind. The other day I was doing a podcast, and I think I used the term, either you're gonna get on that bus or you're not going anywhere. That's it. You're being stuck, and then you're gonna be out of business. You're gonna, a lot of people are gonna suffer because of that. And so I would say that, to answer your question, I think that the first thing that leaders need to do is that they need to recognize that they need to ask for help. Um, this stuff is not it's not easy. And the reason is because this is not a technology project, right? For those
Yeah.
that think that AI is about technology, they're completely wrong. They need to be rethinking this as this is a business transformation. This is the next generation of business transformation where technology is sort of the enabler of it. But this is about reinventing how you do business and how you work and et cetera. The problem is that if you don't, for example, think about your workforce, which is another concept from a leadership standpoint, you need to start thinking about how you're going to upskill them and reskill them now. If you think that you could wait 2 more years to do that, man, just look at what's happened, right? Right or wrong, AI is already getting assigned the bunch of job losses that there's been about 30,000 job losses, right? Whether you count them all through, whether it's Microsoft and Amazon, and not only from the tech side, but a lot of the related companies that are in that sort of that sector. Now, I probably could argue with you over a beer that it's not all because of AI, because there was a crazy amount of over hiring that happened post-pandemic, right? And we're still seeing sort of the results from that. So maybe it's not all of it, but even if it's 80% of those, you're already seeing the effects of AI. And so for those
And these are
that
the smart ones that get it, by the way. These are the companies that see the light more than most of what's coming, right?
That's right. That's right. And so this stuff is hard. This stuff is not going to be easy. It could be, exciting and transformational for your firm, but you need to ask for help. You need to recognize that you need others to come in and help you figure this out, because again, it's a business transformation. The second thing that you need is, before you take on AI, and this is just one example, but I know your question was a little more general, but for this particular example, is, am I ready to take on this next transformation, right? And so my suggestion to a lot of companies that we've been working with is start with a very quick and brief AI readiness assessment within your organization, because you may not be ready to start today, and you need to remediate a few things, but don't start and don't continue certainly just spending money crazily on pilots, on demos, on shiny objects, like products because somebody decided that in marketing that it made sense to go buy this thing. Don't make the same mistake that happened during digital transformation. Learn from that. And because again, this time is going to be more costly. So do that AI readiness assessment inside your organization. Figure out, many times, you know what we find is that the number one place on where people are not ready is because their data is not ready. And AI is a data discipline at the end of the day, right? The only way that this thing gets smarter and better, and it's through training of more data and then some more data, right? And so we find that a lot of times those organizations are not ready. So be ready to do that. The next thing that I would sort of advise from a leadership perspective, and I can't say this enough and stress it enough, because I've been saying it for 15 years to some of these companies that I've been working in, is either the CEO or the COO, they need to be the architects and the biggest cheerleaders behind some of these times and transformations. Your CIO and your CTO will be there absolutely every step of the way to support you, but it needs to be driven from the top. This
Yeah.
is not, time for, okay, well, I'll relegate that responsibility to somebody else. It is too precious. It is too important. It needs to be led from either the CEO or the COO, because it will be transformational. And I know what many companies are going to say, dude, but I just finished going through a major transformation. You mean to tell me that I need to go through it again? Unfortunately, the answer is yes.
Or you don't have to, but by the way,
Or
you're
you
not going
don't
to be
have
around
to.
much longer.
That's right. Or you don't have to. That's right. You do have an option. You always have the option of do nothing, right? That is always an option. But if you want to stick around, then I think the answer is yes. Yes, you may have to go through some of these things again. And so I would say that, that those are some of the things. Now, the last thing I would close with is that a lot of people are afraid this times of all these technologies converging and robotics, AI. Am I going to lose my job? Are they going to, are these things going to take my job? Um, and so leaders need to, first of all, inspire trust, inspire, hand holding, inspire, confidence to their people and their workforce, because there's going to be a lot of changes. It may get bumpy before it gets better, and in this time, one of the things that they need to do is that instead of fearing it or driving fear into their workforce, like I've seen some CEOs do, what they need to do is they need to inspire excitement. And you know what? This is going to be great. This is going to be transformational. But let me tell you how it's going to be transformational. So Duolingo was doing this the other day. They actually did a really nice job in outlining how AI was going to transform their organization. Um, and others have tried. Some have gone a little bit better, some have gone a little bit worse. But all I could say is you need to embrace it, right? Like hiding and putting your head under the sand, and or running away from it, or waiting until somebody figures this thing out for you, is not going to work. Certainly not this time around.
Alex, as you were kind of sharing those leadership perspectives in these times, I was thinking, I think this is a message for, all the CEOs out there who are, and there's lots of them who are kind of like all those different points that you talked about, that I think they're thinking through exactly those things, right? And I think you've laid out, and like, where do I go? How do I start? What do I do? What should I be thinking about, right? I think you've kind of laid out the different dimensions that they should be thinking about. I think some tips and trips, and I think a good framework to think about it, right? Digital transformation. This is a whole thing. It's changing, and then what to do. And I think your AI readiness, right? I think that's a great thing, right? So if your CEOs are listening to this, connect with Alex and on that. And I'm sure there's you get some great services in that way because it's multifaceted, right? It's not just tech, right? And the one
Exactly.
thing, the one thing, I was on a pod. I just had Lily Hill on the podcast. I think she mentioned it's about superhuman, right? It's like you have all these tools now that make you superhuman, and you could be 10 times a superhuman with all this tool, but then how do you best leverage it? So if you have a workforce of 10, is it now like a workforce of 100 or 1,000 as they become superhuman and pull all that together? So, Alex, it was thanks for sharing all these perspectives on the podcast. It's been a great 20 plus year journey, and I can only imagine what the next 20 are going to be like. You hit the 10-year milestones and stuff. So any last words, and how do people get connected with you and find out more about Alejandro on social?
Yeah, I gotta figure out how I use AI to grow my hair back. So that's
Oh, that's coming. Yeah, no, nothing exponential growth and stem cells and all that stuff.
so. How do you connect with me? I think I'm most active on LinkedIn. You could just look me up there. I tend to write a few pieces a week, and best way that you can reach me is just through LinkedIn. Send me a message. I'm pretty good about returning, emails and messages, and you know, I'll help in any which way I can. And if I can't help you, I'll find somebody who can.
All right, well, Alex. Well, hey, great having you on the pod. We're gonna binge Living Color this weekend. And until next time, my friend. Thanks a lot,
Thank
Alex.
you, David. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.